Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the ESA webinar series. Appreciate you being here this morning. In case you don't know who I am, if you're new to this, I'm Joe Chwanek, the Executive Director over at the Environmental Services Association of Alberta, ESA. Before we get started, I'm going to ask one of our speakers, Dustin Twin. He's a council member for the Swan River First Nation in Northern Alberta, to give us a traditional welcome and greeting, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Joe. So a lot of times, this is where someone says a land acknowledgement. We're coming to you from the territory of a certain group or groups of Indigenous people. So I'll give you the Indigenous version of that, which is Tanse Kakio, Dustin Twin, Nisigasu, Wapsu Sipi, Ochinia, Ni, Upsis Ni Howie. And in English, I come to you. My name is Dustin Twin. I'm from Swan River, and I'd just like to welcome you all. I come to you from the territory of Musqueam, Kihil, Kiwitnuk, Umsk, Muswa, Wasque, Mitos, Sita, and so many others. In English, those are the names of our relatives: bear, eagle, beaver, moose, birch, poplar, spruce. And there's way too many around here to name, I guess. And so we come here to speak on their behalf a lot of times as Indigenous people, because a lot of times those things are looked at as property or whatever, and so they're not given agency. So anyway, I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar. I'd like to thank the partners represented here, who you're going to hear from in a moment. I'd also like to thank Tree CO2, which is a pair of wonderful young ladies who are crowdfunding for this initiative, and you'll hear more about them, I'm sure. So with that, I'll turn it back to Joe to introduce the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Thank you for the welcome. Appreciate it. A copy of the recording will be, the webinar is being recorded. It'll be available online later today at esa.org/webinars. I'd also encourage everyone, if you haven't had a chance, to check out the Envirotech website, esa.org/Envirotech. It's a month away. We could use a lot of registrations. It helps. It's a great program. We have an Indigenous opening speaker and an Indigenous panel, and then our usual technical talk. So would appreciate you checking that out. I'd like to, before we get into the webinar, thank our sponsor today, the great folks over at Waterline Resources. Waterline works with a broad range of clients and provides innovative environmental, hydrogeology, and data management services. They know that one solution cannot solve every problem, which is why they've equipped their team of experts with the environmental industry's best on-the-job training and data management tools, which allows Waterline staff to complete each project in a technically excellent, efficient, and cost-effective manner. I would encourage you to check out their team and their work at waterlineresources.com. So with that, I'll now introduce everyone, and then I'll come back in for the Q&A at the end. So you've met Dustin, who's a council member for the Swan River Nation in Northern Alberta, up Lesser Slave Lake area. Danny Rose, a communications sustainability responsibility for IKEA Canada here in Edmonton, and Mike Toffin, founder and managing director of Project Forest, which you probably all also know from Tree Time. So with that, Mike's going to moderate the session and the discussion and the Q&A, and then I'll come back for questions. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Joe, and good morning, everybody. As well, I'd like to throw a thank you to Waterline for sponsoring the event today, and as well, a big thanks to Joe and Isa for hosting Project Forest First Community Engagement event. As I'm sure all of us around the computer screens this morning are itching to have an in-person event, and hopefully in a couple months we'll be able to do that. That said, thanks for everybody for joining us here this morning. It's really appreciated. A little bit of an introduction about Project Forest. Our mission when we started it last October is to create a community of like-minded, environmentally responsible businesses to come together with the unified mission to, create positive impact across the landscape, not just here in Alberta, but hopefully one day across the country. And by working with the corporate community, we're able to work towards not just positive impact, but significant impact. Project Forest is able to solve a couple problems that is currently being experienced in the corporate community. Whether folks are looking to get an increase or work on their ESG rating, they may have some CSR, corporate social responsibility goals, or they may be looking at a carbon reduction or a carbon net neutral initiative. Project Forest can help solve all those challenges in one way, shape, or form. And when it comes to carbon reduction, it's really important to know that trees are part of the solution. They're not the only solution. So there's other things that a lot of corporations can do internally to mitigate their carbon output. And then once that's understood and the gaps identified at the end of the day, then we can use trees and forests to help remove that carbon from the atmosphere. We were really lucky when we launched in October to have our first project location just 30 minutes east of Edmonton. It's in the Golden Ranches Conservation Area, which is part of the Beaver Hills Biosphere. What's very unique about that area, it's a UNESCO recognized biosphere. There's 18 UNESCO biospheres in the country and only 719 in the world. So to have something that close to Edmonton and to be able to work on an initiative where we're restoring habitat and transitioning non-productive agricultural land back into forests in the original condition, it's really unique and we're really grateful. That property is owned by the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Alberta Conservation Association, the Edmonton Area Land Trust, and the Alberta Fish and Game Association, and the managing partner there is the Nature Conservancy of Canada. We have a 55-hectare parcel of land that we're working on. We'll be planting a little over 110,000 trees and 11 different species. And also a thank you and a shout out to our founding member was Tidewater Midstream, as well as JSK, who I'm sure a lot of you are also familiar with around the computer this morning. They both committed prior to launch last October, and things like this wouldn't be possible. Project Forest wouldn't be possible without our corporate partners. If anybody would like to learn more about that, can direct you to our website simply at projectforest.ca or send us an email at info@projectforest.ca. I'm really excited today to chat with both Dustin and Danny about some of the work that we've been lucky enough to start with Dustin and his community. As Joe introduced Dustin, he's a council member for Swan River First Nation, located around Canuso and Slave Lake. And I'd just like to ask Dustin the first question. Dustin, what attracted you to Project Forest when you heard about us, and why did you want to partner with Project Forest?
Yeah, so everybody watching, I guess, can see how Mike dresses. So I was working with Mike on another project with similar aims of restoring our territory. And in those meetings, I kept seeing, you see his hat and you see his shirt and stuff like that. I kept seeing that Project Forest name. And so I was 90% sure that I could get behind a company or whatever it was. So I asked about it, and it turned out that I could, and it turned out that it's been a partnership that that's working out. And really, Swan River will partner with anyone who wants to promote or facilitate life on this planet. Like it's kind of a simplification, but really our goals are to sustain life. And so that's what when we look back on our culture and all the teachings and all the stories and stuff, that's what it seems to always be focused on, and not just human life, but life. Like, and so understanding the interconnectedness of everything, and saying that if you take care of something, it will take care of you. And nature seems to have all these reciprocity built into all their relationships, where a vine grows up a tree, and they work together, and they both survive, right? So yeah, once I learned more about Project Forest, and I saw that it could fit into that picture that we have for our territory, or the future of our territory, it was definitely a good fit.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. And I know I'm grateful for our relationship and partnership as well. Normally I'm taking a lot of notes during this meeting. Today I won't, but thank goodness it's recording. I learn a lot every time we get an opportunity to talk. So just thanks for sharing your knowledge with me and with all of our partners in Project Forest. On Earth Day, Project Forest officially announced our partnership with Swan River, and it's called the Project Forest Swan River First Nation Ecological Reconciliation Project. The differences between working on a conservation piece of land like Golden Ranches and on the Swan River First Nation property is a little bit different. We're still using trees to create that goal, reestablish disturbed habitat, and create a forest. But as we engage with Dustin, he's tasked us with a few really important missions, and I'll talk about 3 of them here. Dustin and his group funded what's called a food gathering study, and we're incorporating the information from this food gathering study to reintroduce traditional foods back onto the landscape by using food-bearing plants and shrubs or other, herbaceous plants that may offer medicinal benefits to the community. We can incorporate that into our restoration plan and ensure that we're bringing additional value back onto the landscape. What'll be really key here, and I'll let obviously Dustin explore this thought a lot in more depth, but by reintroducing these traditional food species and plants back onto the landscape, it allowed community members to go out and interact with the environment and these areas in a much more traditional way. Second, we've been asked to come up with strategies to reintroduce traditional land use opportunities back onto the landscape. And by using the information in the food gathering study, ensuring that certain plants are deployed onto the landscape, and then looking at species distribution, we can also attract different, ungulates and other species back onto the landscape that community members can utilize for food, which is really fantastic. And then when the community starts interacting with these land areas, the traditional land use opportunities naturally follow. One similarity between Golden Ranches and the area we're working on Swan River is they're both non-productive agriculture land. I'll let Dustin talk about it in more detail, why there's non-productive agriculture land inside the boundaries of Swan River, but the answer to that really will highlight why the project is called the Swan River First Nation Ecological Reconciliation Project. As we reestablish the traditional land use opportunities, we're also going to be incorporating opportunities and areas to share knowledge so that the elders will be able to transfer knowledge to the youth and also practice ceremony, identifying certain important plants and talking about them, and we'll know exactly where we are, so we don't have to start searching through the forest. There'll be predetermined locations, which will be a fantastic opportunity. And thirdly, Dustin and Swan River have really led the way in this project, but sharing with other nations is a mandate for us. We've been asked to document and template exactly what we're doing. So once we figure everything out, we'll be able to share with other nations across Alberta and hopefully across Canada one day. Dustin, if you could tell the audience, really explain to us, what is ecological reconciliation and what does it mean to you and your community?
Yeah, so reconciliation is a term that probably everybody hears all the time, and it's super political. So we could talk for hours about just reconciliation and how different people define it and what they use it for, or what they feel like the end goal of reconciliation is. So Canada feels like it needs to reconcile with us, and for Canada, it usually means having us get more involved with Canada and kind of recover from the past, talk about our shared history, put it in schools, and work on Indigenous people recovering from that past, and then kind of getting in line with Canada. For us, reconciliation is more about our relationship to Mother Earth and to Turtle Island, which is our territory. We have some serious relationship repairing to do ourselves. Like we've allowed so much damage to happen on our land, and we've really removed ourselves from it and from our culture and our way of life. So there's a big gap there that didn't used to exist. So for us, reconciliation is more about repairing that. And so the damage that was done through like colonialism and early Canadian policy, and like you could argue whether some of those things kind of continue or whatever. Our reserve is like a prison. That's the original reason for it, was to get people off a land, off the territory, and keep them sedentary, so they didn't move around and didn't live that kind of a lifestyle. That it's not conducive to property rights and resource extraction and stuff like that, right? So that's just the plain fact of it. A reserve is like a prison. That was the original intent of it. And so what they did with that prison to try to keep us here was they gave us in any treaty, numbered treaty, and we're treaty number 8. There's a bunch of stuff in there about farming implements, and we're going to provide these people with farming implements and cows and so many tools per number of families and all this stuff. If you read the written text of the treaty, a lot of it has to do with agriculture. So after treaty, there was a lot of Canadian programs for First Nation people and First Nation communities around agriculture, and they'll pay for you to clear your land, they'll pay for you to build fences, they'll pay for you to do all these things, and a lot of those things were encouraged and accessed by our people. And so a lot of our land is sitting there like it's like an old mining town. If you go up north and you see an old mining town, that's a ghost town now. Our reserves are like that. It's like a farm that was once a farm, and now it's just sitting there like a ghost town, like a ghost farm. And so for us, that's the legacy of the treaty process of Canada, of colonialism or whatever, is that we're living on this just abandoned farm. And so it's not conducive to our culture. Like there's no reason for us to have fences and to have empty fields where horses don't eat and nothing eats there, and it just sits there basically because you would have had to convince us that our culture and our way of life was not valuable and was not the best way to do things or whatever, which that was the failure of colonialism, was that never took that yeah, I don't even know if that's possible, to take a group of people and convince them that they're not you could completely extinguish their culture and whatever. I don't think it's possible, because even though we're very traumatized and have all these impacts, and you see all these social woes, and if you see pictures of reserves, there's just all kinds of issues and problems, and it might look dirty and there might be garbage, there's just all kinds of impacts, right? Because you're looking at like just a condensed like couple hundred years of trying to completely change people, and so that's so chaotic, right? But at the end of the day, with now like the world looking at those kind of things and saying, you know, reasonable people look at it and say that's not a good thing to do to people, and so everybody's talking about reconciliation or talking about how do we get over those things or whatever. But it's kind of silently agreed upon that, okay, Western society is prevalent. Western society is largely good because people are good. You know, people want to help each other or do things or whatever. They all want to sustain life like we do. They just have different ways that they developed over time of going about that, right? So so rather than, like, we don't share that view that Western society it's prevalent, it's everywhere, so it seems like it's the best way to do things. Like science will eventually get there where it's able to balance everything or whatever. We already kind of had that balance built into our culture. Like we have we'll get into this later, I guess, but we have a very old culture, so I think we already got to that point where Western science is really, Western science moves fast. Western society moves fast, and they're getting there. Scientists and everybody's focus now is on climate change, is on how to balance all these things or whatever, and that's why we're talking to each other. We feel that the fastest way for us to get there is to go back a little bit. Like we may still look like everybody else, or drive vehicles, or do this and that like everybody else or whatever, but in the large part, we'd like to get back to having that balance. So for us, reconciliation means reconnecting with our land, making it healthy again, and so that we can be healthy with it, I guess. As the health of the land has degraded or gotten worse, our health has gotten worse because we're land-based people. This is where we're from. So if our land gets healthier, and when it does, and when we do things, when we hire young guys who never finished high school and never taken part in society really, and really never would. They live here. A lot of people live here and they never leave. They never have that urge to go and take part in society and whatever. But when we take them out and we do a project like this, and they do planting, or they go monitor on rivers, or they go do grizzly bear studies and see the populations of different animals and all those kind of things or whatever, more and more we're doing that work, and more our people are like plugging into that and saying this is actually a way that we can reconcile with the surrounding society and like take part, but it's on our terms and it's for our goals and stuff. So I think it's a natural fit for us, as long as that's why we're so open to these partnerships and whatever, because if people, we know everybody wants to survive, we know everybody needs to drink water, needs to do all these things or whatever. So if we feel that we have value and our culture has value in achieving those things, then those partnerships are really natural. So to me, ecological reconciliation means undoing a lot of that damage, replanting all those areas that are now sitting there stagnant, fields and all those areas, and making it back to the way it was as much as is physically possible.
Justin, thanks so much for sharing that. As I said, every time I get an opportunity to hear you chat, I always learn something new. The next question I have for you is, I think, an important one for the group. As we work through this ecological reconciliation project, and hopefully we continue to gain momentum, we're currently working on 40 hectares of land, but I believe there's about 750 inside of Swan River's territory. What does success look like to you in Swan River First Nation, and why are you really motivated to complete this work?
There's 750 on our reserve. In our territory, there's way more than that.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No. And so just to say that our focus is not solely on our prison. Like we're lucky that Canada at some point said, you guys take care of your own prison. You like, we'll let you guys take care of it and whatever. And so we're able to transition out of that, out of like, okay, we're not confined here. Actually, in a lot of ways, it's turned into kind of a stronghold where you don't have to be ashamed here. You could feel like you can still connect with your culture, whatever elders hold, whatever they still have and held on to and had to hide from Canada and whatever, and go through all the things that they went through. This is where we're concentrated on reserves. It's all Indigenous people, so people don't shame each other for their trauma and stuff like that. They try to help each other out anyway. So success to me is I already have one grandson, because Native people are like wolves. Wolves howl at each other, and they take a census, and they see in their territory how many wolves are there around there. And if the population is low, females will make more. They'll have bigger litters. That's how adapted they are, right? And so that's how intelligent life is. And for us, it's the same thing. We're so pressurized, and we lose a lot of people and whatever. So we have lots of kids. And so anyway, I have 5 boys, and I already have a grandson, and I'm fairly young still. So hopefully on my reserve and in my territory, when I'm old man, if I have more grandkids and if I'm lucky, great grandkids, I'll be able to take them to this area that we're talking about. The area that we're planting, we've talked to Mike about it and Project Forest, and we have to leave a trail there because we have ceremony there, our family, and we have people's ashes there. Like, we don't have a graveyard, we just have a piece of land that we know that our family will always have access to. And so we have, whenever somebody passes away, almost always they're cremated, and almost always their ashes end up there. So for us to have a forest right there where we could go and kind of walk with those people. Like all of our ceremony is always centered around spirits, and like we're very fortunate in our spiritual beliefs. You can still sit with spirits, and you can still feel those people, their presence, and you can still interact with them. So we have that spot where we go and do that. And so right now it's just in a field, like it's right by a field. And if we can go there and pick berries and take my kids there and tell them about their ancestors and yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dustin. I know when I was lucky enough to meet you there in the middle of March and take a look at that land. It's a special place, and you could feel it's not just a. I mean, currently it's field, but it's not just a field. There was something there, and you know, part of what when you talk about being able to take your grandchildren and hopefully your future grandchildren to interact with this land that we're working to help restore, it's creating that legacy. And part of our promise to you and to any other project forest partner and really the citizens of Canada is that when working with us, we make that guarantee and we make that promise that the seedlings that are planted, the plants that are planted will become a mature forest one day, and we're going to achieve that. And motivated really strongly and passionately to make that happen for so many reasons. And thanks for sharing that with us. You know, it's important work and it's emotional. And I honestly feel really lucky and blessed to be able to create a project where we're able to use my skill set, which is trees, to really impact people's lives in a super positive way. It's a unique opportunity and it's really special. And thanks again for allowing us the opportunity to work with you like that. Last
Mike,
kind of, yeah, go ahead,
yeah.
please.
So the easiest way to explain it is if you go to college, or you start your own business, or you do something where you are able to provide security for your family, you're able to leave whether you own a house or you own land or you have accumulated a certain amount of whatever, where you feel like your family is safe. It's the exact same thing. If we could go there and pick berries or whatever, it's the exact same thing. I know that they can take care of themselves. So the exact same thing. So then hopefully most people could understand it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great example. And it's a big responsibility for us to try and complete this mission because we know how important it is to you, your family, and your community. It's a big deal. And finally, just to put some context on your family and the community members of Swan River, how long have your ancestors lived on the traditional territory here, not just the reservation, but in the area? And what do you envision for the future of the area there, Dustin?
So in our immediate area, our people, I think, if family to family, it varies a lot. Like because there was a tumultuous time and people came from all over. People were pushed from the states as settlers and stuff moved across the states. People came north. As Canada came west, people were ahead of that, coming west and trying to continue our lifestyle. So a lot of families here are from somewhere else, kind of displaced and whatever, and came to this area because there was some strong people here. And so some of our families are from those strong people that were always here and said, yeah, come here. And when people get here, we'll make treaty with them and we'll keep our territory and keep our way of life and so on. So to the immediate area, it still goes back. Like there's archaeology around Lesser Slave Lake that's whatever 5,000, 7,000 years old, right? Of sweats and pits with rocks in them and whatever, which is like you could go in my backyard and see the same thing. So we've had a continual presence here for thousands and thousands of years, probably since there was no ice, and so like as ice receded from the south, medicine wheels started to get built in southern Alberta, and so you could track those back to where there was no ice, 15, 20,000, 25,000 years ago, and find them in like the central United States or whatever. And so those same people doing those same things, um, that's like, if we had more time, we could talk about medicine wheels or whatever. Medicine wheels is like it's like cutting edge technology. Medicine wheels is like how to keep track of the universe, like stop, like all the stars, all the comets, and all the things that are on an orbit that present a danger or have some influence over natural cycles. Like we our calendar is by moons, right? And a moon, the moon has an influence on natural cycles, on tides and on all these things or whatever. And so they knew that at this time of the moon, these are the things you do. At this time of the moon, these are the things you do. And then every full moon, it happens 13 times every year. And so our calendar is like, it works perfectly with nature. There isn't, it's 364 days. There is no extra day for like, we'll put men above everything and have an extra day for man or whatever, even though we have to kind of compensate and have leap years and stuff like that or whatever. Our calendar is just like, this is how actually nature works. 13 moons. If on that full moon, 13 moons from now, you look around and the same things are happening. You know what that day is. It's not a progression of years. It's the same day happening over and over. It's a cycle. So you come back to that same day and you know, okay, there's going to be winter in the next 2 to 4 weeks. There's going to be snow. We have to do these things. And then 2 moons from now, there's going to be crust on the ice, and we can do these things, and so on and so on. So our you only get there from living and being able to pass things down for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so to me, Western society is fairly young compared to that. And so like you can see them, they have their libraries of knowledge and they have all their stuff, and they're trying to build upon it and like get to the point where they're able to find some equilibrium and do the things that they want to do and progress and stuff like that. But still, they understand that they're dependent on nature. They're starting to really gain that understanding of they're dependent on nature, right? I think yeah, it's at least tens of thousands of years. And even today, there's people speckled across this continent and South America who are linked genetically and stuff, that are still living the same way that they did tens of thousands of years ago. There's people living in the Amazon and stuff like that who don't even know what a TV is, who don't vote and don't have any kind of cards or anything like that saying they're part of society or they're a human or whatever. They're just like they're just living in the cycles that exist there, and they're not disrupting it. So it's like it's the example I always point to. If you have people, humans, living in an area that people can point to and say, look, this is the kind of area that we should have that takes up CO2 and does all these things that we want nature to do or whatever, people can coexist with that. They have for thousands of years, and they still do today. And there's people up north that live their traditional way and have canoes and hunt seals and live the way they always live. They're not impacting their ecosystem because they're developed over thousands and thousands of years to do that, to just all of our stories are about animals and how animals a lot of our stories about animals messing up, and like the fox got his bushy tail because he'd screwed up in some way, and so you teach a lesson through that. And like the fox, you can't hunt all the chickens or you won't be able to eat. You like if you're a bear, like I used to have this elder named Muskwa. Muskwa means bear, and he said he would say a bear could, if it wanted, go and slap everybody around and go and just, and he could decimate the forest. He could hunt everything and kill everything. But he knows enough to know that he wouldn't live if he did that. He would not survive. That's how people need to be. People can do the same thing. And so so yeah, we've been here, I guess, for longer than anybody knows. Every time you put a shovel in the ground, like Mike's partner is an archaeologist. If you put a shovel in the ground in the right place, the clock just keeps turning back and back and back. But according to us, we've always lived here. Our origin stories are here, Turtle Island. When ice receded and there was water everywhere and there was barely any land to be had, we have stories of that time. So like as long as this place was habitable, we were here, and probably even before then, because the good thing about being indigenous is like traditionally living like those people live in. If something happened to the Amazon and there was room for it, they would move. Their houses are able to be put on their back. That's how we lived, right? And that seemed like the best way to do it. Just like a beaver or anything, a beaver might build a new house every year or every couple of years, because if the water moves or changes, he can move. And so that seems like the best way to do it. And so we have that all over the place. Like my family lived here for thousands of years maybe, but before that they lived somewhere else for thousands of years because there was ice here or whatever. But they didn't have a big like imposing something imposing on nature where I'm here, this is my property, and nothing can move me. I have dominion over all things, and I can control everything or whatever. That's not reality. That's not how nature works or whatever. So the biggest worry right now is climate change, and in some parts of the world there's already oceans on people's sidewalks and stuff, and they're stuck there because of the way that structured society or whatever, the way it builds and stuff like that. They're stuck there. It's a crisis. Like they can't just put their house on their back and move somewhere. They can't do that. We're not there either. That's why we have the same sense of urgency. We need to reestablish those things or whatever. We'll never not see value in it, even though, like, you know, they're SpaceX, they're flying to Mars, they're doing all these things, and humans are just progressing and progressing. Still, you have to survive on a planet. Still, there's going to be nature. There's going to be cycles. There's going to be, how does the water get produced on that planet or whatever. No matter where you go, you're not going to get away from it. Even if you can produce water out of the air, you still need, it's still a natural process or whatever, right? So yeah, you have to be able to adapt. You have to.
That was one of the adaptation piece is something that I really attached to during one of our previous meetings, Dustin, when you said we're the true adapters. We've been adapting from before the Ice Age, when the Ice Age came, and into now. And it's just really an interesting perspective to, when we talk about adaptation and climate change, it's really a part of the history, the way you explain it to me. I'd like to now transition the conversation a little bit. IKEA is the largest private retail company in the world. And as we all know, a significant user of wood-based material to manufacture the products. And I know a lot of folks probably have IKEA furniture in their house. Danny, we're really happy to have you on the session today. And I know IKEA has some really amazing sustainability goals and some timelines that you guys are pushing forward. I'm wondering if you could talk about those with us, and then kind of tie that into why a project like the Swan River First Nation Ecological Reconciliation Project is important to IKEA, and why you're joining us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I could listen to Dustin talk, and we've talked a few times, and you'd learn something new every time. And I can see some IKEA furniture in Dustin's. He's got a little kid's blue chair in the background. So yeah, IKEA sustainability goals, they are huge, but they need to be done. We are striving for zero waste by 2030. So circular, climate positive 2030, and that's only 9 years away, which needs to happen. And we're going to get there. We don't know how, but that is a goal, which is huge. And you are going to see a lot more companies, though, starting to finally make these changes within their organizations. The reason we wanted to, support initiatives like the Swan River First Nation, Ecological Reconciliation, is because the passion and inspiring people and the education that has been forgotten a lot as well. IKEA Edmonton, we were the first store to put in an Indigenous showroom, and we worked with the Indigenous communities and asked, what do you want? It wasn't about IKEA making money off this, it's about how do we educate people and showcase our diverse cultures. And the Indigenous communities, have been left out and forgotten. So how do we bring kind of everybody back together and get on the same page with the help of people like Dustin, the Indigenous artist Lance Cardinal. And I just feel like this is such an amazing project. And you can see the passion when Dustin speaks. You just want to help out right now. I want to drive to Swan River and start planting. So it's great to, get our customers and our coworkers and everybody more aware of what, this could lead to and how it could help everybody and our Indigenous communities. So yeah, that's kind of why it's important to myself and IKEA.
Thanks for sharing, Danny. I know the circular economy is so big right now, and we always keep talking, or we hear people, planet, profit. Like how can we still have a business? And kind of like what Dustin said, we're all people, we all need water, we all need food, we all need a place to sleep. How can we accomplish those goals with different means, and now really start putting the interests of planet Earth and Mother Earth at the forefront of our decision-making process? So congratulations to you and IKEA with those sustainability goals. That's a big deal. In 9 years, like you said, it's only 9 years away. That's there's a lot of work to get done, right?
But it has to be done, otherwise the planet's not going to be a healthy planet. If you look into, I've been on different calls and different studies, and it is amazing to see organizations like Project Forest working with, Dustin and the Swan River First Nations team to help our environment. And we need to showcase this more, which I think IKEA can lend that voice to and be kind of, a ladder.
And thanks so much for that. And then just kind of final question before a real brief summary for myself, and we turn it over to Joe just for some questions. But specifically, how does a company like IKEA think they can help a project like this and in turn inspire other corporations to pursue the similar goal?
Yeah, and that was such a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So it is the private sector's responsibility, especially in an industry like IKEA, where we are very dependent on lumber. We need to bring awareness, support initiatives like this, and we need to make this a focus. So we're transitioning to become that fully circular business, and responsible sourcing sometimes just not enough. What can we do even better? So it's replenishing resources in a way that makes sense for biodiversity. We need well-managed supply for the future forestry and relying less on raw materials. So it is, it's up to us. It's up to us to be responsible. And I think also, even if you're not IKEA, if you're a smaller business, to also think, oh, what can I do better? Or what can, I take from this? And just to have it in, on your mind moving forward for the future. For Dustin's grandchildren and children, we want to make this the best Earth and the healthiest planet.
Yeah, I mean, we can't create that positive impact, significant impact, and that legacy unless we all come together. And you can't understate the power of community. I mean, one person can do good, but a community and civilization can do great things.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about how folks can help with this, and reaching out. I mean, we're engaging with different corporations of all shapes and sizes. But what's really an exciting opportunity for us right now is the federal government has initiated the 2 billion tree program. I'm sure we've all heard that coming from Ottawa, that we're going to be planting 2 billion trees, but the program was initiated in early March, and Project Forest has applied for funding for Swan River First Nation. And what that means and the commitment with that application is the federal government's willing to fund half of the money required to complete this work, and Project Forest is working with the corporate community to come up with the other half. And when we come together, we can leverage that funding and get a lot of work done and really make impact. I also want to, when we talk about how can I help, Project Forest has been lucky enough to engage companies like some of the largest in the world and also some of the smallest. I always like to draw attention to one of our partners, Autumn Goose Coaching. She's a one-woman show based out of Saskatoon, a really big champion of the green movement and circular economy. And she keeps telling people, yeah, you should reach out and talk to Project Forest, but she didn't feel comfortable doing that without being invested. And then we have some of the largest corporations signing on in a big way, and folks like Tidewater, our first and founding member, signing on for a 5-year commitment. And then there's even the high school crowd. Dustin mentioned this earlier in the introduction. There's 2 young, amazing high school women in Ontario have created a non-for-profit called Trees CO2. And their call to action is to plant 1,000 trees for each global youth. If that call to action happens, we'll have planted 1 trillion trees. And I mean, there's probably not, maybe there's room for 1 trillion trees in Canada, but this is a global initiative. And it's also an opportunity for the individuals to participate. They've started a GoFundMe campaign with all those funds going to the Swan River First Nation Ecological Reconciliation Project. And if you want some more information there, you can see in the chat the link to their page. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Joe. And thanks again for Danny and Dustin for sharing all that you chose to share today. It's really important work, and I'm really happy that we were able to get everybody around the screen today to have this conversation. Joe, some questions, please.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dustin, for your honest, emotional. We could see the emotion in you talking about your ancestors and the trees and the forest, and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. It was touching, but like to see that. It brings some meaning to a project like this. Just I think Mike and I have talked, just so people know as well, RemTech, when we are allowed to do our events in the fall again, hopefully this fall, Project Forest is going to be for, ESA's a nonprofit. We like to give back as well. We have a project called, we've deemed it ESA Cares. So that over the life of RemTech over the last 19 years at the event, through silent auctions and fundraising stuff, we've raised $1 million. So we're to different charities. So we're adding Project Forest to our list of charities, and it'll be cash and in kind like what we're doing today, and we'll help out where we can on these important initiatives, raise some money to plant some trees and bring back the land to the way it should be. So to questions.
Thank you, Joe, for that. I mean, we really appreciate it. Yeah, words can't really express our gratefulness, not just for this session, but for things like that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there a map available showing the parcels intended for the project?
There is, and one thing I didn't touch upon, so we did release the announcement here on Earth Day, which was April 22nd. There'll be an update coming to our website in the coming weeks. Yeah, so that's how we'll communicate it, and there may be some other social media information coming out with the specific location where this is going to be happening.
Okay. What's the website again, just for a reminder for everyone?
projectforest.ca. And right now, full disclosure, you're going to see a lot about what Project Forest is and the Golden Ranches project. The Indigenous component and the First Nations and the Swan River project will be coming up here in the near future. There's some specific information about it through our social media post that went up yesterday.
Okay. And if people have a direct question, we can go long. We don't have to wrap up at 12. We can go a few minutes later. If you have a question for Danny or Dustin, or for everyone, just put it in as part of your question, and I'll get to as many as I can. Will these be permanent forests that you're building?
They will be permanent. So when we talk about the promise that I make to Dustin, to the people of Swan River, the citizens of Canada, there's a Project Forest monitoring plan. The specific example that I like to talk about is the Golden Ranches project. We're taking over the environmental liability of that, and we're responsible to have it meet these thresholds. we're in consultation with the NCC to make sure we're all on the same page. What do these thresholds mean? And once all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, we'll be able to share that monitoring plan with anybody who would like to see it. In addition, part of that promise, once we reach those thresholds of the monitoring plan, and the standards at Swan River will be very, very similar, we're saying with confidence that our project areas will be on a trajectory to become a mature forest and also be picked up by something called the National Forest Inventory, which is a non-government program sponsored by the federal government, which does an annual inventory of all the forested land base across Canada every single year, and then reports it as part of our country's Paris Climate Accord commitments to increase forested cover. So our project areas, we guarantee, will be picked up by the National Forest Inventory one day, and we can make that commitment because we're on the hook to ensure that the monitoring plan minimum thresholds are met.
Okay. Dustin, what type of edible plants and berries are going to be included in the Swan River project?
Saskatoon's a superfood. Saskatoon's like better than blueberries, and they're like, so we did that plant study, and obviously there's a bunch of traditional knowledge of the area amongst our community. So plants that already grow here and will fit in naturally, right, is what we're looking for. And so we already have those food source plants. They're just not as abundant as we would like them to be. So Saskatoon's, fiddleheads, there's just all the ones that are already naturally occurring here. We also hope to, aside from this parcel of land, and maybe it'll be tied in, but Mike's growing some sweetgrass for us, and so there's sweetgrass very few and far between around here, even though it does naturally grow here. So we're hoping to reestablish that too, or whatever. That's like a monumental thing for us to have that on our reserve. It just can't be overstated how important that is for us. So that's another thing that Mike and his team is helping us out with.
So there'll be no introduced species. There'll be like ones that were naturally there before. Okay. Danny, I have a question for you since we didn't get to it in Mike's question. I personally want to hear the answer.
Okay.
IKEA recently bought a large forested land parcel in Georgia. Can you tell us more about that and why?
Yes, so I can tell you it is 10,000 acres in Georgia. And what they bought it for is, of course, to restore it because they wanted to make sure that it was taken care of properly. So what it is, I guess it was forbidden by typical forest land owners to kind of go into it. And so now the public will be able to enjoy it. They'll take it back to kind of like they'll rewild it, they'll work with it, they'll make sure it is preserved properly. So, and I believe that they are hoping that this commitment, with buying, in Georgia, that there's other lands that they can protect and keep natural and make sure no one does go in there and, build a condo or you never know, just destroy the forest land. So responsible forest management with that area. So yeah, it's 10,000 acres in Georgia, and I know that they do plan on hopefully buying more. And they do have some in Asia and Europe as well that are protected. So it's great to see, and hopefully we will see it. And this is kind of another way that maybe we could, work with Project Forest, Swan River First Nations, and pilot something out down the line.
I hope so. That would be great.
Yeah.
Mike, is Project Forest a registered charity?
Yeah, good question, Joe. We are a non-for-profit, a Part 9 non-for-profit in Alberta, but not a registered charity. Just for clarification points there. Yeah.
Okay, but you're a nonprofit. Okay.
We are a non-for-profit, correct.
I guess for Mike or Dustin, has there been archaeological work and assessments done on the intended parcels? And what type of engagements have been done with other members of Swan River?
That'd be a question for Dustin. With respect to Project Forest, we have not done any archaeological assessments within the parcel that we'll be working on, but Dustin can provide some more context. I was in the office in March, and I got a chance to meet with some of the other community members and council, which was really a rewarding experience to talk about the project. But Dustin, if you can maybe share some more information around that question in particular, please.
Yeah. So there hasn't been archaeology done, no. And as far as talking to the rest of the community, we have a couple. We have a group that called the our traditional knowledge holders group, and so it's a group of elders that they were formed to deliver land-based learning in our school and in the surrounding schools. So, and they were chosen, like they choose themselves. We just chose a core group, and then they just accepted new people in as they knew, okay, we're going to teach canoe making or whatever it is. We know this guy has that, so we're going to bring him into the group kind of thing. So they moderate themselves and they bring people in as they need. So a lot of our history is there. Like some of our oldest elders are there, and they have a lot of that history of who lived where and all those kind of things or whatever. So we've definitely engaged that group with our larger goal of like reforesting as much of the reserve as we can. So the land in question is like we have a BCR system, which if you're not from a reserve or whatever, you probably don't know what that means, but it's basically people get BCR as a portion of the reserve, and it stands for Band Council Resolution, and so that's how they hold. It's not title, but that's how they hold any given piece of land. They've been allowed to use and occupy this piece of land. Anyway, the piece of land in question is in my father's BCR, and so I talked to him and I said like he has yeah, anyway, I won't get into his personal views or whatever, but he talks about like we should use this piece of land for maybe for horses, or there's constantly like my dad was in the mission for over 10 years. Even after he was too old to take schooling anymore, like First Nation people were only allowed to go up to grade 8, and at the time, and he was done grade 8, but he they kept him there for a few more years and stuff like that. Anyway, he's like pretty heavily impacted, and so it's almost like he's proud to see me have a kind of more indigenous mindset and less worry about what everybody thinks or whatever. Like in his mind, it was rammed into him that land improvements is a thing. Like that's what people refer to it as. If you clear land and you put houses there or whatever, it's called land improvements, right? That's not a concept that we have. It's not a concept that we have. Like if you go there before any people have been there, you can eat for sure. You can get water for sure. There's clean air for sure. If nobody's there and it's not impacted, everything you need to survive is there. You can't improve upon it. So anyway, as I keep telling him about this project, whatever, because it's on his BCR land or whatever, and he's allowed to make land improvements and all this kind of stuff or whatever. He understands the purpose of what I'm trying to do, and he's basically the main say so that I have to get, and I have to convince him like whatever. If we have a little bit of land for gardens or for whatever, but the majority of it, if we're not using it, it should be everything should be allowed to live there. We should be sharing it like we're supposed to, right? And he does ceremony and he understands that and he agrees with it or whatever. So yeah, that's my main say so that I have to get or whatever. But definitely we're trying to mobilize our whole community, and like in this project there'll be people doing planting, there'll be people doing like monitoring and doing all those things or whatever. And then hopefully, because there's this like adopted Western mentality of like we kind of own land, or people kind of own portions of the reserve or whatever. We're trying to get away from that and trying to be like it's in common land, really, but by law it's in common land. So everybody should be able to take part or have a say or whatever. and everybody shouldn't just mean humans or us or whatever. And like, okay, we're Swan River band members, so we claim ownership over that land or whatever. Everything should be able to live there if they need to live there or whatever. So that's kind of, we're trying to like allow that mindset to get into everybody, and everybody take that view of like, it's just sitting there right now anyway. It's not helping anybody, and it's not helping the overall issues in the territory, whatever. It's actually having a detrimental effect. There's less habitat. It's right along the river. The piece of land we're talking about is right along the river. So it's like, it's riparian area. It's ideal habitat if it had the plants and stuff that should be there, right? So that's a long-winded answer.
Well, great, thanks. Can individuals who want to plant these traditional plants access the food gathering study? Is that public?
It's not completed yet. It's not completed yet, but Swan River, yeah, like I said about property, we don't have that like intellectual property kind of mentality or whatever. So like, yeah, any studies that we do or whatever, we try to put them out there. And like yeah, there's no reason for us to hoard that information or whatever. It's just that the whoever the partners are involved or whatever, we have to get their say so and stuff like that. But yeah, we have no problem sharing it.
Okay. I got one more. How will Swan River include the other 800 members that do not live on the reserve in this project? How can those people help?
Yeah, like I said, there'll be planting opportunities and stuff like that. It's a very loaded question if you're familiar with like band politics and stuff like that or whatever, because people always make in all society, people make like these separations, like left and right, or all those separations in groups of people and whatever, right? That's like such a prevalent thing. It's not like a full circle of just everybody can sit at that circle, and everybody can have a say or whatever. And even in band politics, because there's money involved in all these Western like constructs and stuff like that, a lot of that is prevalent here too. So like that's a really meaningful question, because all those people off reserve, almost all of them to the person, is not off reserve because of their own choice. They were displaced through through sexist policies of, if you're a woman, a Native woman, and you marry out, you lose your status. So your kids are somewhere or whatever, and a lot of those people are getting their status back and stuff like that. And then there's also policies of people lost rights here that I know of, just because they wanted to go in the bar or vote or whatever. Like all these things that were illegal. To hire a lawyer, you couldn't hire a lawyer. You had to give up your rights if you wanted to hire a lawyer. So all those things. And then there's the 60 scoop, which is like putting kids in the child welfare system, which some people are familiar with or whatever. So most of those off reserve people that end up like seeing it as a separation, or people see it as a separation, even here, on reserve and off reserve, and they're different groups of people or whatever. That's crazy. It's so crazy for us to do that to ourselves and whatever. For me, on this piece of land, because it's like I said, it's on my dad's BCR and whatever. Anybody could come here. Like I try not to ever make that separation, even though our funding and all that stuff is so complex, and like they give. If you look at Alberta's budgets, they get so much money for First Nation people for all this programming that we get money for the on reserve, they get money for off reserve and all that kind of stuff. It just creates all these artificial separations between groups of people that should never be there. Like why would we have a broken circle, and we facilitate we like whatever, keep that ongoing or whatever? It's crazy. I spent half my life off reserve and half my life on reserve because of like trauma and stuff, because of like my dad couldn't maintain a family because he was so traumatized, and he was taken away from his family and all that. So like that's the situation off reserve people are in a lot of times. things like that that cause people to be off reserve and on reserve or whatever. It's just a terrible distinction for us to continue and make and whatever. Whatever. So whatever we can do to try to facilitate off reserve people taking part or whatever, we would like to, for sure, or I would like to on this project for sure. Anyway.
Great. Before I turn over to Mike to close, I'd like to once again thank everyone for participating today. Mike and Danielle, Danny and Dustin, and everyone who's logged in. Reminder that the recording will be available later today at isa.org/webinars. I also encourage you, we have another webinar coming up on May 10th. Open to everyone, they're free. This is the second one in our part about mental health, not our normal topic, but it's important that we cover it. So May 10th is dealing with low mood and motivation. So I encourage you to sign up for that one on May 10th. Also check out Envirotech, isa.org/Envirotech for the program. A great big thank you to our sponsor, Waterline Resources, and the great team there. Remember to check them out at waterlineresources.com. And thanks to Michelle and everyone there. With that, I'll just turn over to Dustin for some closing remarks.
Yeah. I a lot of times, like, it's unfortunate that First Nation people, like, if you sit in front of our band hall and there's an old guy sitting there or whatever, and you sit there and you start a conversation, there is no time is not a consideration. Like, you can't condense that conversation, and you can't be like give him talking points or get to these certain things or whatever. It might be the most it might seem like just a bunch of tangents kind of as he's speaking or whatever, but it's almost always a circular conversation. It almost always comes around to, like, you would never expect him to tie all those things together and come back to whatever you asked him about or whatever. Could have been the simplest thing ever, and then he tells you, like, about life, basically, or whatever. I would like to like, because some of the questions, especially like the last question, it's so complicated. Our current existence, governance structures, society, culture, our whole existence right now is so impacted and traumatized and convoluted, and so many outside influences, and it's very hard to focus on what's important. It's very hard to get over trauma and people's trauma, and, like, so when we're dealing with each other, we're coming at each other with a whole bunch of baggage and trauma. And it's a lot of times it's very hard to cut through all that and say what's important, like, what's our goal as Indigenous people, what's the point of our culture and our civilization and whatever. And let's I think that's the best way for all of us to go forward. I try not to make any distinctions between like Cree and Blackfoot, or on and off reserve, or left and right, or any of those kind of things are just separations. They help groups of people keep everything structured and in line, because they separate people from each other and whatever. Meanwhile, the whole planet is in trouble. Like the systems that sustain life are in trouble, and we're all just focused on these little things and these political things and whatever. I always try to, like, I don't focus. I probably will have a hard time. The more I talk and stuff, I'll have a hard time keeping my position, because I'm not political, and I don't have that kind of mindset where, like, I should focus on, like, those little things, and I should try to get those groups of people and like speak to certain groups and all this stuff or whatever. That's a big distraction in my mind. It's a big distraction, especially when you're talking about the future of any one of our families. It's more important than anything else we could focus on. It's like the point of every single living thing every tree, everything does it perfectly. They don't know about, they don't ever focus about politics or any of that stuff. They focus on making seeds at the perfect time. They focus on, like I said, with the wolves, they will make more seeds in their body to make sure they survive. They will never wipe each other out because they'll be at risk of getting wiped out themselves. Like when First Nations used to have conflicts and stuff, it would always be so quick to get to peace talks because you're at risk. You can't have a war with another group of people and risk your whole family and your whole life. You can't do that. Like that's not even a thing. Yeah, we had conflicts and stuff, but any groups would be so quick to figure out that conflict, draw the lines between how big of a group that is and how big of a group you are. That's what wolves do. They okay, now this this group is getting bigger. Their territory changed a little bit, and they might have little skirmishes on the outskirts, but they're all gonna try to live. They're not going to try to kill each other and wipe each other out and not worry about how life is going to continue or whatever. To me, that's what everybody's focus should be, really. And I know that our culture, that's the focus of it. And so the more we get back in touch with that, the more we focus on that, the better off we'll be, the healthier we'll be. So I appreciate you giving me the time. And yeah, I appreciate like anybody that helps us out, anybody that tries to help us out or can help us out or whatever. We're open right now. Like we were closed off for so long because we're so impacted and we didn't trust anybody and whatever. We're trying to be open and trying to be like, I know everybody wants their kids to survive. Everybody does. And maybe everybody doesn't know the right way to do it, but okay, maybe they need something from us then. Maybe we need to share with them and they'll share with us or whatever. That's the way our culture is built. It's reciprocity with everything, with all people. That's why Europeans are here, because they wouldn't have survived without us. We helped them. It's not we were never conquered. It's yeah, that's the basis of everything. It's reciprocity. That's why the bear doesn't kill everything, because he needs all those things to live. He knows that. Yeah, so that's how everybody should live, like Muskwa. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you. Well said. Danny, anything to add?
No, I just want to thank you for, I love listening to Dustin talk, just how powerful and and educating everybody. I think that's where we need to start as people, it's not about IKEA, it's about Danny, right? Also learning. So thank you so much for having me on today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Danny. Thank you to IKEA for your leadership on the environment file. Mike, over to you. First, congrats on a great project. You approached me when this was in its infancy way back in the day. You're showing me mock logos and videos. It's come a long way in the last year through COVID and everything. So congrats on this. I'm glad you're helping out which seems like a great group of people up at the Swan River First Nation and Dustin. So congrats on that. I'll let you close off.
And thanks again, Joe. I do remember that socially distanced meeting we had in Starbucks there last year. And you're right, it's come a long way. Any new opportunity or venture is a lot of work, but the passion of our partners and the passion of my team is really unsurmountable. I mean, I haven't experienced something like this, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. And it gets me out of bed every morning and prevents me from going to sleep some nights too. Some of the closing thoughts, just to really pull it together in a couple simple words. Connection to nature. Like, how are we all connected to nature? That's a little bit different for everybody. And then when we talk about trees, I won't go into it in detail. I won't share my own, but everybody has a tree story. And just kind of think about a tree that may have been important to you at some time in your life and how that impacted you. The stories are important and the stories are different, but I don't think there's many people out there that don't have a memory of their favorite tree and the emotional connection you have to that. That's the connection to nature. That's what we're trying to work together. And I'll end our conversation with a Greek proverb, but one that resonates me is, society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. something we get to do every day at Project Forest in its free time. It's important work. And thanks again, Joe, for hosting our first community engagement session. And fingers crossed, we can meet with people in person here by the time the next one rolls around. And thanks for everybody for joining us. And again, Danny, thanks for making the time and answering some important questions and sharing IKEA's fantastic work. And Dustin, I never quite know what you are going to share with us every time. Today was a really special conversation, and thank you for opening up like that and letting us know what this means to you and your community. It's a privilege to be a part of your group and to help restore some disturbed habitat that should have never been disturbed a long time ago.
Perfect.
Thank you all. We'll leave it with that. Stay safe.
See you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.